Who are our politicians really working for? It's supposed to be us, right? The everyday South African citizen, the voter whose votes put politicians in power, and then politicians try to keep our votes by serving us. That's how a democracy is supposed to work. But political parties are businesses, and all businesses need money to exist, and they need to earn money in order to continue to exist. And most businesses, especially political parties, are more effective and can expand more the more money they get in, so that they can hire more people, so they can organize more events and have more media days and get more attention, so that they can get their word out further to try and convince you and me to vote for them. So it's really important to know who is funding the different political parties in South Africa, because those people who are giving those donations have agendas, they have desires, and the political parties have desires to satisfy the demands of their donors so that they get more money in future. But the problem in South Africa is that we often don't know who is funding our political parties, and many of the parties are doing everything they can to avoid telling us where their money is coming from. So let's look at the laws governing political party funding in South Africa. Let's look at who's trying to avoid telling us who's funding them, and let's also look at the parties who have told us who's funding them and what we can learn, if anything, from that information. This is the issue with political party funding in South Africa. This is The Issue with Dan Corder. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. If you're brand new here, click on the links to find out more about our Patreon exclusive content, as well as our podcasts. And if you don't want to miss a thing, as we continue to tackle big issues facing the country twice a week, just click subscribe. Right, let's have a look at the money guiding South African politics. Do you want to know something completely insane? Until just recently, political parties were not required by law to tell us who was funding them at all. No matter who the funder was, no matter the size of the donation, there was no legal obligation for them to tell us which business interests, which money they were trying to keep happy, trying to please. Here's the exact wording. Parties are not required to disclose who funds them. Donations to political parties are not required to be reported or disclosed. Likewise, in-kind donations do not need to be reported or disclosed, nor do third-party fundraising efforts. Do you know how insane that is? If any business makes any money, if any South African receives any significant cash, the tax service SARS is entitled to know how much money that is and where it came from. But political parties, the organizations who get the power to run the country, take on our highest levels of office, they didn't have to tell us where the money resides.
Where the money reside, where the money reside.
Then in 2020, sanity prevailed, in my opinion. President Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law legislation that requires political parties and independent candidates to record the names and details of their donors and make financial records available on a quarterly basis. And this new law requires parties to provide records on any donation exceeding 100,000 rand. And I must be honest, I think that 100,000 rand as a threshold for declaring a donation is like way too high. If a political party got 20,000 rand, I'd want to know where it came from. And there's actually an organization called My Vote Counts. They have an app that they use to track political party funding and to tell South Africans who the donors are who are giving money to particular parties. But they also do a lot of work in the courts. They're trying to advocate for a change to this legislation to make political parties actually declare all their donations, no matter what the size, because they believe that South Africans have a right to know who is financing their political leaders, and democracies are actually healthier when the citizens know where the money is coming from. And My Vote Counts is also upset about the fact that the legislation doesn't force political parties to show how they spent the money that they've received. And so My Vote Counts is arguing in court that political parties should be forced to show the South African public how they have spent the money they've received from private donations so that voters can make an informed choice about who they want to give their vote to in an election. But for now, the law signed in July 2020 by President Ramaphosa remains the law that political parties are supposed to abide by. Surprise, surprise, almost immediately it ran into problems. In 2021, the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, told South Africa that a full 2 months after the first deadline to disclose political party funding donations, most political parties in South Africa had not sent through any records or disclosures at That's all. The IEC refused to tell South Africa which political parties had not yet submitted their records of donations. And you might be thinking to yourself, but Dan, it was the first time the political parties had ever been expected to do this. Maybe there were teething problems. Yeah, sure, there may have been some teething problems the first time around, but the truth is many major political parties have been pretty open about how badly they don't want to disclose who is paying their bills. And broadly, all of these parties argue that private funders do not want to have their donations made publicly known across South Africa. Action SA has come out strongly against My Vote Counts' legal attempts to amend the law. They say that many of their donors are fearful of donating above the 100,000 Rand threshold because they don't want bigger parties like the ANC or DA to find out that they are donating to Action SA. Action SA claims that these donors are genuinely scared of consequences, reprisals, whether economic, business, political, or social, from the bigger powers, and that disadvantages new political parties like Action SA. But some of the bigger parties also don't want to declare. High-ranking ANC member Aaron Motsoaledi has suggested legislative amendments to the law that would make private party funding more opaque, harder to see or understand. And the EFF has literally told its donors to donate less than 100,000 Rand. Malema has been completely open about it. At an EFF event, he literally said, break down your donation so it comes to 90-something thousand, and then donate like a separate 30 Rand so that nobody has to know that you've donated us this money because you didn't cross the threshold in one donation. And the ANC is catching on the same cuck. I don't know if you're going to bleep that. Maybe. At the beginning of this year, they started a crowdfunding initiative so that everyday South Africans could easily donate to the running of the party and their election campaign. There are two kinds of pledges you can do. One of them is by using an SMS, and you can pledge between 10 and 30 Rand. And the other one is so obviously doing what it's doing. Like, there's no subtlety here. You can make an EFT payment of pledges between 100 and 99,000 Rand. An undeclarable or not need to be declared amount of money. Now that's interesting because the law currently does say that you as a political party need to declare cumulative donations from one source. So if a source, say, gives you 50,000 Rand, it only gives you 50,000 Rand in one quarter, and then another separate 50,000 Rand in the second quarter, you've got to declare it because over time they've given you higher than the threshold 100,000. But for parties that don't want to show us their books, this is a convenient way of making excuses, muddying their own waters and not declaring. The EFF has often not made their accounts public. You're supposed to declare your donations that you've received every single quarter. They only actually did it once in the 2021-22 financial year. And I do understand the argument that some donors may not want their donations made public for a variety of reasons. Maybe you don't want political backlash. Maybe you just want the donation to be pure business and you don't want it to fall into other business or social relationships that you may have. And the fact of the matter is, many political parties may not want you to know who their donors are because the donors have got allegations of criminality against them, or they have been convicted of criminality. There are a lot of reasons why political parties may want to keep their dirty money quiet and hidden. And so on balance, I personally think that it is way more important that the voters of a country that has a democracy know where the money is coming from, how political parties are paying their bills, because when we know the identities of who is funding the political parties, we can start to understand why political parties may advocate for different policies or behave in particular ways, and so understand them better. Knowing who is funding our leaders will allow us to better be able to spot when a politician is behaving sus, when they're behaving strangely, when they're making decisions that break their promises to us voters or don't seem to work in South Africa's best interests. We might be able to go, that's not a good idea for we the people, but it certainly seems to work for that guy or that company. But now let's look at who we do know is funding different political organizations who want your vote. We have been told about quite a lot of private donations from the last few years. And if you go on My Vote Counts, you can see all of the data, all of the donors, where the money has gone to. And some political parties are starting to willingly talk about and publicly declare their finances. Most of the money from donations comes from the Oppenheimer family, the famed South African family business conglomerate, and also from Michel Leroux, who made his fortune as one of the founders of Capitec Bank. South Africans are also now learning about the Durban-born, Australia-based billionaire, it's a lot of B's there, Martin Marshall. He's made his money in gambling. And the other major donor is the Bato Trust. Now, if we go down into the numbers that we have been told, because remember, it's almost certain that a ton of money has been donated to all the political parties off the record or creatively under 100,000 Rand. The ANC has received the largest share with 137.6 million Rands of donations, then the DA 125.3 million, then Action SA 65 million, and then the EFF 3.5 million. Now you may be thinking, Dan, that's a little short, it's a little small compared to the other parties for the third biggest party in South Africa with the Malema pull factor. And it's commonly believed that the EFF is getting a ton of private funding, they're just not declaring it. Think about how expensive it is to run a highly effective political machine that goes to all corners of South Africa like the EFF, with all of their employees, all of their activists, all of their events. And then think about the fact that the DA and the ANC, the only other two political parties with truly national vehicles of political advocacy, are working in the more than 100 million donations. It just seems commonsensically like money's going to the economic freedom fighters that we don't know about. But to be clear, money could easily be going to all of the other political parties that we don't know about, including the DA and the ANC. I mean, weren't the ANC recently being sued almost into bankruptcy when they couldn't pay a 150 million Rand tab to a company that had created them elections merchandise for the last elections? And didn't the ANC lose 244 million between 2018 and 2022, despite the fact that they earned 1.9 billion Rand in the same period? Doesn't sound like 130 million in donations over the last handful of years tells the whole story. Now, South Africans have really been talking in the last few weeks about the donations that we have been told about that have gone to many of the opposition parties. And many South Africans are saying that the opposition parties are similar in their identities. It's basically all the anti-ANC opposition parties except the EFF. If you look at the Oppenheimers and Michelle Leroux and similar kinds of donors, they are giving to the DA and Action SA, My Man is Bossa, and Rise Mzansi. And yes, obviously donors have motives. Maybe they want to strengthen the opposition parties. Maybe they really hate the ANC and want to take it down. Maybe they want to line up all of the opposition parties on similar agendas to champion certain policies or care about certain positions. That's very possible. But the other thing that's vital to remember is that donating to multiple parties is just good business. Patrice Motsepe is a great example of this. His Africa Rainbow Capital has kind of donated to everybody over the last decade or more, because if you can bet on multiple horses, then no matter who wins, you've bet on a winner, you've created a relationship with them, you've got access to their highest echelons of power, and so you become a winner no matter who actually wins. And of course, the identity of donors and how much money they've given to different political parties has been politicized. In Michelle Leroux's case, the co-founder of Capitec, the ANC Youth League has tried to initiate a boycott of the bank because of the millions of rands that Leroux has given to the Democratic Alliance. And we, the South African public, have spent the last few days talking a lot online and IRL about these different donors and how much they've given to different parties because of those disclosures. And that is fundamentally a good thing. It's a really important thing. It's vital information to know when considering who to give your precious vote to in late May in the national general elections. Like, it is important who the DA might be listening to or might be trying to please, scrutinizing Musi Maimane's books or Rise Mzansi's donations. This is all exactly what we need to make democracy function better. And what we as a country should really be thinking about is who is doing everything within their power to not disclose where the money resides. Because we should, as a people, try to push political parties to be honest and open with us for our own good and for the good of the country. We must look at Michelle Leroux and the Bato Trust and the Oppenheimers. We must look at all of them, but we must also think about what we can't see, the invisible money that is guiding many of South Africa's political parties that they desperately don't want to tell us about. That should be cause for concern. That should make you worry and think twice about who you're going to vote for in this general election. So that's the issue with political party funding disclosures in South Africa. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Remember, we'll be back on Thursday in just 3 days' time, looking back over the last 7 days in the country and taking out and analyzing 3 really big, interesting, consequential stories, explaining them and understanding why they really matter, which we do every single Thursday. It's called News Worth Knowing. And we will have the return of our new hit segment on that show, Uya Luta 99. See you in a few days. Give us a subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thank you for your attention.